Hello and welcome to part 3 of 3, the final installment of the Hunter Biden special spectacular. We've been promising it all year, and here it is in 3 glorious parts. I'm incredibly tired. I'm delirious. This is 7 hours after we recorded, and you're going to be amused at how much more tired I seem than I will after the white flash. But what we're up to was, I'm going to take it from here, by the way. Melina, the ghost of Melina, will be joining me at times. I'll be pasting her in with things she has to say, but I'll be essentially taking it from here to the end. And where we left off, the last gripping installment, was we were going through ways in which Joe Biden may have been helping our hunter by committing official acts, as in as part of his job, he was doing things he wasn't supposed to be doing, potentially, to help Hunter Biden out. Now that could well be considered corruption. So let's see what we're up to. The next bit, I believe, was I was chasing down an allegation that was made by a number of conservatives and a lot of newspapers that Joe Biden may have been allowing Hunter Biden to launder talking points benefiting Burisma through Joe Biden's office. So, was Joe Biden essentially being the publicity agent for Burisma through Hunter Biden? Let's find out after the white flash. So I'm now going to forward on without Melina. It's a brave new world where I'm just talking to myself because I can't get anyone to talk with me. Look, I'm going to do my best. I know that this is going to be pretty dense, pretty hard to get through, which is why I like to have two-handers so we can break it up a little bit. But I'll try and rail through it as fast as I can. Let's see how we go. Let's get to the next claim. Whether Hunter got Joe to be Burisma's PR guy. Let's hear what Tucker Carlson has to say about this.
On November 2nd, 2015 at 4:30 in the afternoon, a Burisma executive called Vadim Pozharsky emailed Hunter Biden and his business partner, Devon Archer. The purpose of the email, Pozharsky explains, is to, quote, be on the same page about our final goals, including but not limited to a concrete course of action. So what did Burisma want exactly? Well, good PR, for starters. The executive wanted, quote, high-ranking U.S. officials to express their, quote, positive opinion of Burisma. And then he wanted the administration to act on Burisma's behalf. Quote, the scope of work should also include organization of a visit of a number of widely recognized and influential current and or former U.S. policymakers to Ukraine in November, aiming to conduct meetings with and bring positive signals and message of support to Burisma. The goal, the executive explained, was to, quote, close down any cases/pursuits against the head of Burisma in Ukraine. So that couldn't be clearer what they wanted. Burisma wanted Hunter Biden's father to get their company out of legal trouble with the Ukrainian government.
Now, to be very clear, what you just saw from Tucker Carlson there was a gross misrepresentation of the email. It wasn't an email to Hunter Biden, but it wasn't about Hunter Biden. It was about the lobbying firm, Blue Star Strategies, that he was negotiating for them to hire. They were saying what they wanted Blue Star Strategies to do. That's why what they were saying was lobbying activity. Hunter Biden was not there for lobbying activity. He was there. He was a member of the board of directors. They wanted to hire a lobbyist to do lobbying activity, and that was Blue Star Strategies. And they were saying what they wanted the lobbyist to do. So that was highly misleading from Tucker Carlson. But let's take that thought. Now let's cut forward to something which the conservatives are really big on. It's the events of December 4. This is all going to come together. According to Devon Archer, on December 4, he met with Zlakevsky and Pozharsky for drinks. And they said in Dubai this was. And they said, we're under pressure. We need to go. We want to talk to Hunter. And then they met Hunter and they said, quote, they were feeling the heat or whatever. And they were like, okay, can we call DC? And Archer said, quote, on that call, I was not in the earshot of that. But I know there was a call made, he says. Now, we don't know why they were under pressure, who DC was, and what they wanted to ask DC. We don't know any of those things. From here on in, it's speculation. Now, The claim made by the House Conservatives, their speculation is that that call led to Joe Biden's visit to Ukraine to have Shokin fired. Now that's obvious garbage because the trip to Ukraine to have Shokin fired was arranged in November. And this call was on December the 4th. But my theory, my speculation comes from the next story, and this all connects together. This is a story from the House Committee. On December the 4th, 2015, Biden business associate Eric Schwerin wrote to Kate Bedingfield in the office of the Vice President, she's communications, providing quotes to use in response to media outreach regarding Hunter Biden's role in Burisma. Later that day, Miss Bedingfield responded to Mr. Schwerin saying, quote, VP signed off on this. According to Devon Archer, after a Burisma board of directors meeting in Dubai on the evening of December 4th, 2015, Hunter Biden called DC to discuss pressure that Burisma asked him to relieve. So their claim is that Hunter provided talking points to Eric Schwerin to help relieve the pressure on Burisma. He sent them to Joe Biden's communications department, and Joe Biden signed off on them. The timestamps all line up. The first email to Kate Bedingfield was 10:45 a.m. US time, which is nighttime in Dubai when this barroom meeting supposedly happened with Hunter and Pajarski and Zilkevsky, where they're telling him to call DC. So that actually all matches up. I'm going to put the emails up now so you can see for yourself. Schwerin suggests two statements. You can see this one here is about President Kwasniewski joining the board. I don't even know what country he's the president of. It says, I joined the board of Burisma to highlight that this is a new era in Ukraine where companies can be organized around sound business principles and free of corruption, blah, 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 blah. It goes on. You can read it yourself. It's all corporate bullshit. We're never going to talk about that quote again, but you can see it for yourself if you're interested. It's just a tongue bath for Burisma, okay? But I'm going to read you the whole second quote. The second quote was from a spokesperson for Hunter, and it said, Hunter Biden joined the board to strengthen corporate governance and transparency at a company working to advance energy security for Ukraine. These are also goals of the United States. Far from being out of sync with the policies of the United States, the board is working to bring this privately held energy company into the kind of future that's critical for a free and strong Ukraine. These are goals that attracted not just Hunter to the effort, but respected American and European political and business leaders. Okay. And the Bedingfield says, VP signed off on this. We'll give this quote to both reporters in my name shortly. Here's the thing though. I'm going to show you once again the email. This is the quote that the VP signed off on. Hunter Biden is a private citizen and lawyer. The vice president does not endorse any particular company and has no involvement with this company. The vice president has pushed aggressively for years, both publicly with groups like the US-Ukraine Business Forum and privately in means with Ukrainian leaders for Ukraine to make every effort to investigate and prosecute corruption in accordance with the rule of law. It will once again be a key focus during his trip this week. So, in other words, that quote has nothing to do with the quote that was sent to them by Hunter Biden or Eric Schwerin. Nothing to do with it at all. That was a completely different quote. It was just about corruption. It wasn't about Burisma at all. It was about Joe Biden distancing himself from all the Burisma stuff and saying, I'm against corruption. So Joe Biden completely ignored Hunter's request. He signed off on something completely different. And these guys know that when they're pretending that he signed off on Hunter Biden's talking points. They know that. They're misleading you on purpose. But the fact is another example of Hunter Biden trying to do something that would be dodgy, but Joe Biden not letting him. Well, Joe Biden not doing it himself. I mean, Hunter still did the dodgy thing, but Joe Biden himself did not allow himself to be involved. That's what happened there. So that's a really important exchange when you look at the email. By contrast, while Hunter Biden is unsuccessful, Blue Star Strategies, the firm that was hired to do this kind of stuff, like talking points and all that kind of stuff, might have been successful. We'll talk about them later on. Now let's talk about Shokin. This is the big deal. If it's true that Joe Biden had the Prosecutor General, Shokin, of Ukraine sacked because he was investigating Burisma, the company that his son was on the board of and getting paid millions of dollars to be on the board of. That is a flat-out impeachment. I am voting for Joe Biden's impeachment there. He should be removed from office. That is flat-out corrupt. The question is this true? It all starts with a clip you've all seen 1,000 times, and now you're going to see it 1,001 times.
And I went over, I guess, the 12th, 13th time to Kyiv, and I was supposed to announce that there was another $1 billion loan guarantee. And I had gotten a commitment from Poroshenko and from Yatsenyuk that they would take action against the state prosecutor, and they didn't. So they said they were walking out to press conference. I said, no, I said, we're not going to give you the $1 billion. They said, you have no authority. You're not the president. The president said. I said, call him. I said, I'm telling you, you're not getting the $1 billion. I said, you're not getting the $1 billion. I'm going to be leaving here. And I think it was, 6 hours? I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Well, son of a bitch. Got fired. And they put in place someone who was solid.
So the claim is Joe Biden sacked Shokin because he was investigating Burisma. Let's go through the truth, shall we? First of all, other countries wanted Shokin gone. It wasn't just America. According to the Washington Post, Shokin's sacking was backed by both the European Union and the International Monetary Fund. Pavlo Klimkin, the Ukrainian foreign minister at the time, told the Washington Post in 2019 that the firing of Shokin was universally urged by Ukraine's benefactors. Quote, the demand came not just from the US and not just from Biden. I heard it in every meeting with the international financial institutions, especially the IMF and World Bank. It was not just Biden, clearly. The Guardian, 10th of February 2016, reports, this is just before his sacking, reports IMF warns Ukraine will halt $40 billion bailout unless corruption stops. Christine Lagarde from the IMF was quoted in the article, without a substantial new effort to invigorate governance, reforms and fight corruption, it is hard to see how the IMF supported program can continue and be successful. March 2016, this is after Shokin resigned, but before, actually this is just after Parliament got rid of him as well, because Parliament had to vote on it. The European Union has welcomed the dismissal of Ukraine's scandal-ridden Prosecutor General and called for a crackdown on corruption. Ukraine's parliament voted overwhelmingly to fire Viktor Shokin, ridding the beleaguered prosecutor's office of a figure who's accused of blocking major cases against allies and influential figures and stymieing moves to root out graft. This decision creates an opportunity to make a fresh start in the Prosecutor General's office. I hope that the new Prosecutor General will ensure this office becomes independent from political influence and pressure and enjoys public trust, said Jan Tobinsky, the EU's envoy to Ukraine. There is still a lack of tangible results of investigations into serious cases, Jan said, the EU's envoy to Ukraine. So there are other countries involved. It's official State Department policy, not just Joe Biden's policy. Lots of people. Remember, Joe Biden was the point person on Ukraine, but he wasn't the only person involved. He didn't have a free hand to do whatever he liked. He was part of the State Department process. On the 24th of September 2015, September 2015, Shokin, the meeting that Joe Biden talked about where he asked for him to be sacked was in December 2015. So 3 months earlier, Ukrainian Ambassador Pyatt says publicly, there is one glaring problem that threatens all of the good work that regional leaders here are doing to improve the business climate and build a new model of government that serves the people. That obstacle is the failure of the institution of the Prosecutor General of Ukraine to successfully fight internal corruption. Rather than supporting Ukraine's reforms and working to root out corruption, corrupt actors within the Prosecutor General's office are making things worse by openly and aggressively undermining reform. In defiance of Ukraine's leaders, these bad actors regularly hinder efforts to investigate and prosecute corrupt officials within the Prosecutor General's office. They intimidate and obstruct the efforts of those working honestly on reform initiatives within that same office. He gave one example of this during that speech. Guess who? Quote, for example, in the case of former Ecology Minister Mykola Zlotevsky, the UK authorities had seized $23 million in illicit assets that belonged to the Ukrainian people. Officials at the Prosecutor General's office were asked by the UK to send documents supporting the seizure. Instead, they sent letters to Zlochevsky's attorneys attesting that there was no case against him. As a result, the money was freed by the UK court, and shortly thereafter, the money was moved to Cyprus. The misconduct by the Prosecutor General's office officials who wrote those letters should be investigated, and those responsible for subverting the case by authorising those letters should, at a minimum, be summarily terminated. Then Charlie Kupkin, who served as a special assistant to President Barack Obama and a senior director for European Affairs on the National Security Council, he said, Biden used US aid as, quote, a stick to move Ukraine forward. Kupkin said, quote, he was acting alongside our European allies. Everyone was of a single mind that this prosecutor was not the right guy for the job. Mike Carpenter was a foreign policy advisor to Biden and a deputy assistant secretary of defense. He says, quote, Shokin played the role of protecting the vested interests in the Ukrainian system. He never went after any corrupt individuals at all, never prosecuted any high-profile cases of corruption. By the way, he travelled with Biden in December 2015 to Ukraine. On October 8, 2015, Victoria Nuland said to the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, this is 2 months before the trip to Ukraine, the Prosecutor General's office has to be reinvented as an institution that serves the citizens of Ukraine rather than ripping them off. Then there was September 2020 testimony from Pyatt. This is when he was ex-ambassador to Ukraine. This is asking him about all this stuff. It wasn't Vice President Biden who conditioned the assistance. It was our interagency policy. It was a policy that was developed based on the data that my embassy was reporting from our contacts in Ukraine civil society. Data that the intelligence community was reporting based on their sources. And particularly important, the advice and data that was provided by the US Department of Justice and our experts who were inside the Prosecutor General's office. I'm quite confident that the documentary record fully reflects exactly how that unfolded. I'm also quite confident that it was briefed to Congress at the time. We used the visit of Vice President Biden in December, I believe, as an opportunity to really drive home that point. The Vice President, Secretary of State Kerry, was involved in this effort. There was a whole, so he's saying both of them were. This was a whole of government effort, and they reflected the best advice that we across the administration gave to him. Question, so was the policy advocating for the dismissal of Prosecutor General Shokin formulated by Vice President Biden in an effort to assist his son? Pyatt, no. As I said, it was formulated by the interagency process in all of its glory. Note, Pyatt says many times in this testimony that these concerns would be reflected in the State Department cables at the time. How come we've never seen these cables? It's almost like the investigators are avoiding calling for those cables, isn't it? Be easy to prove that he's lying. Just get the cables. They're available. You can subpoena them. Why haven't they subpoenaed them? Interesting. George Kent, who was the number 2 official in Ukraine at the time, this is what he said during the impeachment deposition in 2019. There was a broad-based consensus that he was a typical, Shokin, was a typical Ukraine prosecutor who lived a lifestyle far in excess of his government salary, who never prosecuted anybody known for having committed a crime and having covered up crimes that were known to have been committed. George Kent also said in his testimony that this wasn't Biden's idea. Question, okay, but you think it's fair to say this was a bottom-up initiative? Answer, to the best of my knowledge, the idea came from Ambassador Pyatt in discussion with Assistant Secretary Nuland and then was pitched to the office of the Vice President. That's really important testimony. That's under oath. Important testimony that this was not Biden's idea. And you know why this is so important? Because it comes from George Kent. If you don't remember, George Kent is the guy, the only guy who raised red flags about Hunter Biden being on the board of Burisma at the time it happened. He was the one who, at the time, there are cables involving him saying that he thinks it's inappropriate and it is undermining their mission. So he is no friend of Hunter Biden being on the board of Burisma, and he is saying that the idea of Shokin being fired came from someone other than Biden. And he would know he was the number 2 guy in Ukraine for America at the time. Republicans also agreed with this at the time. 12th of February 2016, 4 days before Shokin's resignation, there was a letter signed by Rob Portman, Republican, Ron Johnson, Republican, and Mark Kirk, Republican, along with a bunch of Democrats, calling for Ukraine's then president to, quote, press ahead with urgent reforms to the Prosecutor General's office and judiciary. Republicans at the time. December 2, 2015. This is just before Biden leaves for Ukraine. There's more evidence here coming from Republican evidence. Republicans were very worked up about emails showing that Blue Star Strategies were on a press briefing conference call leading into Biden's Ukraine trip. I think I've mentioned this before. The Blue Star Strategies, as soon as they were hired, they were they were joining conference calls, and they were saying, this is what they were saying on the conference call. This is a press call. This is not like some secret State Department call. But the fact is, they were invited on the press briefing call. You go, how did they get in on this press briefing call? They're not the press. I don't know. They're good at their job. They're lobbyists. The fact is, Republicans are trying to act like there's something corrupt about that. I see no evidence for that. But yeah, maybe you think there is. I don't know. But that's not the point. The point is, let's look at what the summary of their call said. This is their summary from December 2, 2015. Dr. Kale said that Mr. Biden would reiterate the message that Jeffrey Pyatt, the US ambassador to Ukraine, has been saying. More needs to be done to enable anti-corruption reforms and not have the Prosecutor General's office stand in the way of those efforts. During his trip, Mr. Biden will stress it's not enough to set up a separate special prosecutor for anti-corruption within the Prosecutor General's office, which has already been done. Rather, the entire institution needs serious reforms to overhaul its corrupt practices. So they're explicitly saying that Biden was echoing State Department policy from Pyatt. They're saying that 2 days before he went. So that evidence is actually disproving the Republicans' own claims. That's introduced by Republicans. And here's the best bit of all. This has not gotten out much, but this is gold. The American government opened their own investigation into Zlochevsky under Biden. In January 2016, a bribery investigation was opened into Zlochevsky by Foreign Corrupt Practices Act FBI squad coming out of the FBI's Washington field office. Now, Joe Biden probably didn't even know about that. But the fact is, under Joe Biden, there was an investigation going on into Zlochevsky at the same time as Republicans are suggesting that Joe Biden was trying to close down investigations into Zlochevsky. It kept on going all through the rest of Obama's administration. Guess who closed it down? It was closed down December 2019 under Trump. A month before the impeachment circus. That's just a nice little coincidence. That a month later, Trump's been impeached. And then on the 3rd of January 2020, Bill Barr gets the US attorney into Pittsburgh, Scott Brady, to start looking for more Burisma-related material as part of the Hunter Biden investigation. And that is the beginning of the process by which they found the FD 1023, which we're going to get to, and I'm going to tell Melina this whole story, not the whole story, but the end of this story that I just began now. The fact is, the important thing for now is that under Biden, the FBI was investigating Zlochevsky for bribery. Trump's people stopped that investigation in 2019 for whatever reason. And less than a month later, they're investigating Zlochevsky again with Hunter Biden because they're trying to find dirt because of the impeachment. And that ended up leading to something which we're going to be talking about later on, which is really interesting. Okay, so America pretty clearly, it seems like their policy, not Biden's policy, their policy is for Shokin to be sacked. Also, Ukraine hated Shokin as well. There's an October 31st, 2015 news article here from Ukraine. About 200 members of the Auto Maiden car protest group on October 31st went to the president's private mansion for the first time since the revolution, demanding the dismissal of Prosecutor General Viktor Shokin. Activists accused Shokin of sabotaging all high-profile investigations, including corruption cases against incumbent and former top officials. The problems have gone out of hand so much that more than 100 of Ukraine's 450 members of parliament have called for Shokin's dismissal. Jeffrey Pyatt, the US ambassador to Ukraine, and Jan Tabinsky, the European Union's ambassador, have publicly criticized the performance of the Prosecutor General's office. So that's protests against him for corruption in Ukraine. 9th of December, 2015. So this is after Joe Biden's meeting in December. Al Jazeera article here quotes Donald Bowser, an advisor to Ukraine's National Anti-Corruption Bureau. He said much of the corruption stems from the Prosecutor General's office. Quote, it's the biggest organized crime game in town. Just stone cold gangsters. He said Shokin and the Prosecutor General's office give a legal facade to the corruption schemes. Daria Kalanyuk, co-founder and executive director of the Anti-Corruption Action Center in Kyiv in 2019, said civil society organizations in Ukraine were pressing for his resignation, but no one would have cared if there had not been voices from outside this country calling on him to go. There is one person who appears to be a straight shooter. At least America thinks he's a straight shooter in the Ukrainian government. There's so much corruption there. His name is Vitaly Kasko. He was one of Shokin's deputies. He's a deputy prosecutor general, and everyone considers him to be on the straight and narrow. According to Bloomberg, at the time Biden made his ultimatum, the probe into the company, Burisma, owned by Zlochevsky, had been long dormant, according to Vitaly Kasko. Quote from Kasko, there was no pressure from anyone from the US to close cases against Zlochevsky. It was shelved by Ukrainian prosecutors in 2014 and through 2015. The case against Zlochevsky and Burisma Holdings was assigned to Shokin, he says, who was then a deputy prosecutor. But Shokin and others weren't pursuing it, according to the internal reports from the Ukrainian prosecutor's office reviewed by Bloomberg. In a December 2014 letter, US officials warned Ukrainian prosecutors of negative consequences for Ukraine over its failure to assist the UK, which had seized Zlochevsky's assets. We've heard this story, according to the documents. Shokin took no action to pursue cases against Zlochevsky throughout 2015, said Kasko. He was Shokin's deputy overseeing international cooperation and helping in asset recovery investigations. Kasko said he had urged Shokin to pursue the investigations. Okay, so that's Ukraine. Now, what do Republicans have to say about all this? Are they saying nothing about this? No. They cite two memos over and over and over again. I'll tell you those memos. I want you to have all the information. June 9, 2015. So this is 6 months before Biden's visit to Ukraine. Victoria Nuland praised Shokin in a letter to him. Quote, we have been impressed with the ambitious reform and the anti-corruption agenda of your government. Jim Jordan has read that quote 1,000 times. He loves that one. But note, according to George Kent, it was in July 2015, after that letter, that the Ukraine Anti-Corruption Office investigated two of Shokin's prosecutor appointees, including his former driver, and found millions of dollars in diamonds and cash in their homes. Shokin at that point in time went to war, quote, trying to destroy the new anti-corruption office. So Shokin's worst performances began in July 2015, when he tried to take down the anti-corruption office. And this letter from Victoria Nuland was in June 2015. So at that point in time, maybe she was giving him the benefit of the doubt, trying, like, because, you know, anyone they get's going to be corrupt. They've got to try and work with the guy, right? October 2015, is getting closer to the December 2015 meeting. There was an interagency memo that said Ukraine has made sufficient progress on its reform agenda to justify a third guarantee. So they were saying then they should get the $1 billion. But that very same email cites other requirements for addressing corruption, including a need to, quote, better ensure that the decision to set up an independent inspector general cannot be easily overturned and the independent inspector general is subject to appropriate oversight and accountability. That never happened. So maybe they felt that while that might happen, they should stick with Shokin, but when that didn't happen, maybe they gave up on him. I don't know. I'm just telling you what's there. You can believe it or not. You can draw whatever conclusions you like. That's the evidence. That's the total evidence. I've been reading this at length because I want you to have the total evidence. That's it. That's all the evidence Republicans have given, except for testimony from one particular person who is Shokin himself. He appeared on Fox. He said, I have no doubt that there were illegal activities engaged in by Burisma. As a matter of fact, the criminal case had been started before me. It continued to expand, and Zlakevsky, who at the time held the post of minister and was the founder and CEO of Burisma, started bringing in people who could provide protection for him. Hunter Biden was among them, and the corruption network expanded as a result. So yes, to answer your question, there was no doubt in my mind that Burisma was engaged in illegal activities. Shokin said he was fired because he continued the investigation. He would have, quote, found the facts about the corrupt activities that they were engaging in. At one point, I should say, the prosecutor after Shokin, Lutsenko, suggested that Shokin might have been corruptly sacked, but then he changed his mind. Now, I'm not going to read those quotes because I'm like, this is taking forever, and he cancels himself out anyway. George Kent reckons he's corrupt as well anyway. As for Shokin, I mean, you can take his word if you want. Like, most other people don't seem to take his word, but you can if you want. Poroshenko, for what it's worth, the president who ended up sacking him, who appointed him, ended up sacking him, had very negative things to say about him on Fox as well. I won't play that because, of course, Poroshenko is going to say that publicly after he's accepted the $1 billion. So I don't think that's very good evidence, even though it's on my side of the debate. What was it that Burisma said to Hunter and Archer, though? Because, you know, whether they actually needed to sack Shokin, maybe they thought they needed to sack Shokin. Whether America wanted to sack Shokin, maybe they didn't know that. Maybe they wanted to get Hunter to get Shokin sacked anyway. I mean, you could still be corrupt, even at the same time as the events are going to happen in your favor anyway. So let's see what they had to say. Archer, in his testimony about Burisma, when he was asked, when you say pressure from the government, that's what they said. They said they were feeling pressure. When you say pressure from the government, at this time, were you aware that Viktor Shokin was investigating Burisma? Archer, to the best, I vaguely, whether it was Shokin, there was a lot of pressure initially. There were several pressure issues. It was kind of a theme of Burisma. There was capital tied up in London, £23 million. There was, a US visa denied. There was a Mexican visa denied. And then so Shokin wasn't specifically on my radar as being an individual that was targeting him. But yes, there was constant pressure. It was like whack-a-mole with regards to the pressures that they had to resolve. Okay, that sounds pretty vague. Let's have a look at a claim from Coma about this, about what Burisma was saying.
But at the end of the day, he admitted that the Burisma executives were squeezing Hunter Biden to try to do everything he could to get the prosecutor, Shokin, fired because they were going after their corrupt energy company.
He's referring again to that December 4 meeting I referred to before, the one where he was asked to call DC. They were saying that it was about the call to DC was to tell him to get Biden out. Get Biden to sack Shokin, we're under pressure. Now, obviously, that doesn't make sense because the meeting was, the Biden coming out to visit Ukraine was agreed upon weeks earlier. It was in the middle of November, I think 16th of November off the top of my head. So this December 4 event had nothing to do with that. Okay, that's rubbish. But maybe generally there was pressure. Maybe. According to Archer, this is what he said to Congress, the narrative that was spun to me was that Shokin was under control and that whoever the next person that was brought in was, this is the narrative spun to me, that Shokin being fired was not good because he was like under control as relates to Mikola. A Democrat asked, what did you understand under control to mean? Archer says, meaning that they were going to maybe give a slap on the wrist as opposed to seize all his assets. He also told Tucker Carlson that firing Shokin was bad, according to the narrative that he was spun.
Okay, so you were told when Shokin got fired that it had nothing to do with it.
No, we were told that that was bad and we don't want a new prosecutor. Shokin was taken care of. We were told that Shokin had already been taken care, that he was under control and that this is going to be a whole big problem for Burisma.
And no, Archer did say that he was told firing Shokin was bad by the DC team, not Burisma leaders. Okay, so the DC team, I think he means is Blue Star, the lobbyists. So it's possible that Burisma was still trying to get rid of Shokin, even if the DC team felt that they didn't need to. It's possible. You need to hold that possibility open. There's one other thing. There were some last-minute moves against Burisma before Shokin was fired. 4th of February 2016 this was. This is 2 weeks before Shokin gave his resignation. The Prosecutor General's office seized, quote, housing estate with a total area of 922 square metres, a land plot of 0.24 hectares, a garden house with a total area of 299.8 square metres, a garden house in the territory of a district, a garden house of another garden house, so 2 garden houses, a land plot of 0.0394 hectares, a Rolls-Royce Phantom car, a not 9245014 trainer, whatever that is. What's going on there? They seized a whole bunch of his assets in Ukraine. He didn't like that. According to the Washington Post, I'll quote them, determined this was largely a technical reinstatement of a court order that had been in place for at least a year. The case, which began in 2014, was transferred in December 2015 away from Shokin's oversight to another prosecutorial entity, the National Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine, which is funded with US and European aid and received technical support from the FBI. Zlochevsky's lawyers took advantage of the gap in oversight while it was being transferred to win court approval to cancel the seizure. That's what the Washington Post says. Do we believe them? No, liberal press, left wing, mainstream media, Biden's monkeys. Yeah, okay. Well, let's listen to Daria Kalanyuk, the co-founder and executive director of the Anti-Corruption Action Center in Kyiv. Let's listen to her again. She told the Washington Post, quote, there was a window of a few weeks when Zlochevsky's lawyers sued to unseize the assets. The court unseized the assets in December when the case was in between jurisdictions. The prosecutors didn't even show up. So on December, so this is now not her quote, this is what she's talking about. So on December 2015, the seizure was cancelled, but she says the court order was not published until January 27th, 2016, and it prompted a public outcry, according to her. So the Prosecutor General scrambled to get it reinstated and the order was published February 4, 2016. And the news story from the Times confirms it was under the previous court order. Quote, none of the objects of movable and immovable property which was seized under the previous court ruling, ... So there's no doubt what was seized had been previously seized under the court ruling and it was unseized in December for whatever reason. They say because of the exchange and the change in the transition in who's looking after the case, they took advantage of it. Burisma took advantage of it. I believe Dara Kolonyuk that Shokin was not suddenly into prosecuting Burisma after Joe Biden had calls for his sacking. So just to be clear about this is after, even if this was true, Joe Biden had already called for the sacking, okay? So at the time he called for the sacking, there's no indication that Shokin was going to change his ways, even if he did change his ways just before he resigned. But sounds to me like he didn't change his ways anyway. But yeah, you make up your own mind. Okay, so my verdict after all of that is that the Republicans can't point to a single piece of evidence of actual Shokin investigation going on before he was sacked. All they can point to is people who were potentially scared of Shokin's investigation. And that's compelling because I've just read you at great length the mountain of evidence of heaps of people who have nothing to do with Joe Biden saying that Shokin should be sacked, including the people who claim that they made the decision or people they know made the decision. I've got quotes from those people as well. And all this is long before the December 4 meeting December 7 meeting and this supposed phone call that started it all, the December 4 call DC phone call from Hunter Biden. So to me, it's really, really clear that Joe Biden did not ask for Shokin to be sacked to help out Hunter Biden and Burisma. It's just really obvious. And by the way, why would it be true? That story he told that people are treating like gospel is obviously made up, like obviously made up. He's talking about how he told them, 6 hours till I leave. You either make up your mind now or you're not getting the money. Like, this meeting he visited on December the 7th, 2015. There was a January meeting between Biden and Poroshenko in Davos where they talked about this again. And there were a whole bunch of phone calls in February about this as well. And then Shokin, on February 19, he submitted his resignation. So that's 3 months later. And then he was finally dismissed by the Ukrainian parliament on March 29. Biden said it took 6 hours. It took 3 months. His story is clearly not true. Like, he's taking a shred of truth, which is he asked for Shokin to be sacked. I think we all believe that. And he turned this complete unbelievable story that then Republicans are treating like it's gospel. They don't treat anything else that Joe Biden says like gospel. He makes up shit all the time. We know this. His anecdotes are never true. Why would you think this anecdote was true? Like, nothing about this rings true. So, and by the way, another thing he said in that anecdote is also untrue. He said that Shokin was replaced by someone solid. No, he was replaced by Lutsenko, who, according to George Kent, who I believe a lot more than Biden, said was just as bad as Shokin. So he's full of crap. It's just classic Joe Biden. Okay, Lutsenko, I'm going to go through this. Look, just a little side. This has got nothing to do with anything, but just if you are looking into this or you hear this story, this is untrue, okay? When I was going through this, I found a Washington Examiner story suggesting that Lutsenko, who was the prosecutor general who took over after Shokin, was also represented by Blue Star Strategies. And if that's true, that would have really stunk. That somehow they got the replacement for Shokin to be a client of Burisma's lobbyists. And that person ended up dismissing the charges. That would have really, really stunk. And so I was looking into this, and according to that article, a lady from Blue Star told George Kent in an email in September 2016, quote, she had represented Lutsenko's interests in the US for 5 years. So that's a big deal. Such a big deal. I made sure I tracked down that email because I do this with every bit of information I've just given you. I track down every single email. In this case, that's not the email. The email says she had, quote, represented Yushchenko's interests in the US for 5 years. Yushchenko, not Lysenko. They're different people. Yushchenko was an ex-president, I think, or prime minister. I think it's president. Ex-president of Ukraine, not Lutsenko. I looked around, made sure I had the right email. Yes, I had the right email. They got the name wrong. The Washington Examiner fucked up. They got the name wrong. So if you hear that claim, you know it's not true. I haven't seen anyone else note. I've seen plenty of people run the Washington Examiner story secondhand. I haven't seen anyone else note that story was completely made up. So by misinformation about that email. So just that might end up turning up again. If it does, you know to check the email. Well, you know, I already did, okay? It's a bullshit story. And then finally, like I said, the charges were dropped on November the 1st, 2016, so a year later, after Biden's meeting. In July 9, 2016, Burisma sent a letter, presumably Blue Star was involved with this, to Lutsenko, demanding him back off. Quote, as members of the board of directors, we respectfully request that allegations of criminal activity made by you and or officials in your office cease and that any investigation be conducted consistent with the standards of fairness and the rule of law. Moreover, it's imperative that allegations of criminal activity made to the media about Burisma and Oslakevsky come to an end. They were signed by 3 people. One of them was Hunter Biden. That there, super corrupt of Hunter Biden. For exactly the reasons that Melina earlier said, that they paid attention to Hunter Biden's presence. Hunter Biden's presence was important. Him signing that letter was important. That's why they got him to do it. And so it's really bad of Hunter Biden allowing himself to be used to advance corruption. It's really bad. And nothing to do with Joe Biden, though. The Hunter, dodgy, seriously dodgy. Anyway, and then Lutsenko end up dropping the charges. Now, according to the Anti-Corruption Action Center, they said the chances were low from the beginning that the charges would stick because the statutes for illicit enrichment in Ukraine require a very high burden of proof to show that the assets were proceeds of bribery. But regardless, they say before long they turned them into a tax charge and then they just dropped the tax charge. There are a number of suggestions from people that Blue Star helped this process along to make it a tax charge, to get like Blue Star, I think, are the real deal as far as dodgy lobbyists go. But that's not Joe Biden. So that's all I have to say about the Shokin sacking. There's a lot, I know, but I want to get all the information. There's also Matt Gaetz has hinted that Joe Biden might have done some favors with the China deal. He's suggesting that they got rid of the China initiative, which was an investigation and into all activities involving China, essentially. They were started by Trump and ended by Biden. He's suggesting they might have done that in return for the payoff from China before Joe was president. That's what he's suggesting. You can hear what he has to say.
A lot of Chinese money that was working its way through these shell companies into the accounts of the Biden family. So the China initiative was set up during the Trump administration at the Department of Justice to go after the malign influence of the Chinese Communist Party. And the Biden Justice Department dissolved the China initiative. And you know what? People don't pay bribes to not get something in return, right? The China initiative resulted in the convictions of a Harvard professor, of someone at Monsanto. So we were working against the Chinese. They paid the Bidens. And now you're sitting here telling me that North Korea is the big threat.
But the payments from China, they're in 2017. The China initiative started in 2018. So that doesn't ring true to me. And I think Matt Gaetz knows better. That's kind of obviously bullshit as well. Put that in the coma file. Okay, and then the final question. Actually, it's not. Oh my God, we're going to go forever. The next question is, did Joe Biden profit from his business? Now, firstly, this is an important question, obviously. Did he profit from Hunter Biden's business, I mean? Firstly, and importantly, none of the business bank records that Combs released show any payments to President Biden. Zero payments to Joe Biden. Maybe they're so well hidden, but zero. None of the suspicious action reports the committee has reviewed alleges or even suggests any potential misconduct by President Biden. They're from banks, those reports. Nor do the suspicious action reports show any involvement by President Biden, Hunter Biden's financial or business relationships. A whole bunch of business associates of Hunter have been interviewed by the committee under oath. Eric Schwerin, Devon Archer, they've explicitly stated they have no reason to believe. Sorry, Devon Archer was not under oath. I should say that. I've got to be very clear about that. Explicitly stated they have no reason to believe that President Biden had any involvement in Hunter Biden's business deals. And they had no reason to believe that President Biden took any official action on behalf of his son's business ventures. Schwerin was his bookkeeper. You'd think he'd know. The next thing is Joe Biden is not living large, like he's making lots of money. Some are fond of talking about his palatial homes, like this example.
Ma'am, you can see that the homes that the Bidens own can't be afforded on a congressional or Senate salary.
Let me remind you, in 1974, Biden bought a home in Greenville for $185,000. In 1996, I told you this before, he sold his house for $1.2 million. That was dodgy, in my view. It was corrupt, in my view. But he used the money to buy a smaller house in Wilmington for $350,000. So he had $850,000 left over after that sale. Then a few years ago, quite recently, they bought a vacation home in Rehoboth Beach for $2.7 million. Out of the proceeds of $850,000 plus all the money he'd made in the meantime, plus the speaking fees, the books he'd written. I find it hard to be suspicious of $2 million extra dollars over 20 years for someone who was vice president. I think he could have made that pretty easily from speaking fees and from books and all that kind of stuff. So that's it. That's all their homes. That's it. The $350,000 home from 1996 and a beach house worth $3 million today. That's it. That is not out of the ordinary in my book. All right, then there's a few claims. There were 2 wires sent from China that were sent to Hunter Biden in the summer of 2019. They totaled $260,000. And they were sent to Joe Biden's house. His house was listed as the address. Okay? The truth is, they listed the Hunter Biden as the beneficiary, not Joe Biden. They just listed his father's home as his address. Hunter Biden had lived at his father's home at some points from 2017 to 2019. He wasn't at Joe Biden's home when the wire came through. When the $10,000 wire was sent in 2019, July 2019, he was not at Joe Biden's home. When the second wire was sent at $250,000 in August 2019, he was not in Joe Biden's home. But he had been previously. I say my verdict on this, who cares? It's the bank account that gets the money, not the address. The address means nothing. And he had been there before. It's really easy to see how he could have given their details back then when he was there and not updated his details. It doesn't matter. It's the bank account. The money is what matters, not the address. So I don't care about that. Now we get to the FD 1023 and we are going to get Melina back in now. Melina, welcome to the other side of the white flash. Let's leave aside the verdict on the Shokin sacking for a second. Let's pretend that it's up in the air. Biden could still be bribed anyway to do something that he wanted to do. Even if Biden won the sack Shokin, he could still be bribed, potentially, right? That's what this form suggested, that he was bribed. Now, FD 1023s are used to record unverified information. We need to be careful on this. All this document does is confirm that someone that Zlochevsky made that accusation to them. It doesn't actually provide concrete proof. This source was considered quite highly credible by intelligence agencies. In other words, they think it's unlikely he made this up. But Zlochevsky, on the other hand, is a different matter. He could be making up anything that he's saying, right, to this guy. This was compiled in 2020, but the following events were from 2016. According to the source, Pajarski said Hunter was hired, quote, to protect us through his dad from all kinds of problems. That rings true. According to the source, Zlochevsky said when told that Shokin's investigation would have a substantial negative effect on Burisma's prospective IP in the US, he said, don't worry, Hunter will take care of all those issues through his dad. According to the source, Zlochevsky allegedly said it cost him, quote, $5 million to pay one Biden and $5 million to another. According to the source, he asked whether Hunter Biden or Joe Biden told Zlochevsky he should retain Hunter Biden. Zlochevsky replied, they both did. During the 2016-17 transition period of the presidency, when asked if he had proof for his allegations that he was forced to pay the Bidens to help him, he said he has many text messages and recordings that show he was coerced to make such payments. In 2019, Zlochevsky told the source that he did not send funds directly to the big guy, who the source understood to mean Joe Biden. Zlochevsky told source that it would take investigators a decade to find the alleged illicit payments to Joe Biden. An addendum to the report from June 2020 says that Zlochevsky told the source that he had 17 recordings involving his interactions, including 2 with Joe Biden. The other 15 were with Hunter Biden. The recordings allegedly show evidence that Zlochevsky was somehow coerced into paying the Bidens to ensure Ukraine Prosecutor General Viktor Shokin was fired. Also says that he has 2 documents which the source understood to be wire transfer statements, bank records, etc., that evidence some payments that the Bidens were made, presumably in return for Shokin's firing. What do you have to say about this, Melina?
Well, first of all, I'd say I've noticed a difference in the news reports about it and the actual report.
Yep.
So the sort of claims about what the FBI report says are generally more sensational and less hedged than what the FBI report says. The FBI report certainly sounds bad, but as you know, it is from one person and it's secondhand evidence. And I think it's just worth bearing in mind that there's lots of different possibilities. I mean, if it's true that they paid $5 million to Joe Biden, obviously very corrupt,
Yes.
very impeachable. But there's lots of possibilities with a statement like this. I mean, the big red flag to me is the fact that it was written up in 2020, and this person was an FBI source for over a decade. So why are they bringing this up now, years after this has been, like, this Biden-Ukraine stuff has been going back to 2018. So why are they only having this conversation in 2020, despite being a source, a continual source for the FBI? So that concerns me. It's not contemporary. And it's not like a lot of the kind of specific allegations in the report about conversations are really vague in terms of when they happen, sometimes not even specific to the year. Sometimes it's like 2015, 16, and yet they're really specific about what was said. And that to me is also a concern of, well, how do you remember that that's exactly what was said when you don't even remember when and where this happened? So to me, I suppose when I look at a report, it certainly like looks bad, but there are lots of possibilities to explain the report. So I mean, for example, I mean, let's look at all the things that could be true coming out of this report. One is that Burisma paid Joe Biden $5 million through Hunter, and Joe willingly, knowingly received that corrupt payment. That's a possibility, that is a true account of what happened. One is that Hunter asked Burisma to pay him $10 million, saying half was for Joe and kept all of it.
Yep.
Possible. One is that the Burisma executive was lying to the FBI informant. And the statement itself says it's very common for businessmen in post-Soviet countries to brag or show off. So this might have just been big noting, pretending to have direct influence over Joe Biden, pretending to have, you know, him like corruptly obtained when he had nothing of the sort.
Can I jump in there? Sorry for a second. Devon Archer, when asked in his testimony about this FD 1023, said two things very relevant to what you just said. Number one, he confirmed that this is the kind of thing that oligarchs brag about, whether it's true or not. The second thing is, he said he gave another option. That he said when he first read the FD 1023, he thought when he talked about one Biden and another Biden, he's referring to Hunter Biden and Devon Archer, who also got about $5 million from Ukraine, from Burisma.
Yeah,
that's another option. Although having said that, that doesn't account for these recordings involving Joe Biden and Joe Biden and Hunter Biden supposedly telling him to hire Hunter Biden, according to the source. Anyway, so go on.
Yeah. I mean, obviously none of those recordings have come out. If they do, then we'll be very interested to hear them. And another option could be that the Burisma executive was wrong, like not necessarily lying, but had some bad information. The FBI source could be deliberately lying. They've been paid $200,000 by the FBI since 2010. The FBI source could be not deliberately lying, but engaging in a certain revisionist history because, as I already said, they're reporting things that happened years ago. Years after it became a political controversy. So maybe their memories of things have gotten caught up in the things that have been reported in the news and sort of contaminated their memory. The FBI agent might have misunderstood. So in the article I read about it, it was saying sources familiar told Fox News Digital that the confidential human source believes that the $5 million payment to Joe Biden and the $5 million payment to Hunter Biden occurred based on his or her conversations with the Burisma executive. But the actual statement says the confidential human source noted at this time it was unclear to them whether these alleged payments were already made. So it could have been something they were talking about happening that didn't actually happen, and they might have misunderstood. You're also talking to people for whom English is a second language. You know, there's all kinds of ways that things could be confused. So, I mean, this is just one example, and this is the case with so many of these sort of allegations where there's lots of different things that could be happening to explain this piece of information or this piece of evidence. And when you're getting, so some general like dodginess and lots of different people involved, everyone has different memories, everyone has different agendas. There are all kinds of explanations, and it's hard to know for sure when we don't know who this person is. We don't know, the details, things about anything about the companies. And so, yeah, it's all very muddy. And that's just like one example of how hard it is to disentangle even individual pieces of evidence, let alone the whole conspiracy.
Can I give you one more bit of information that might assist you as well, which is that you made the fair point that this was in 2020. This statement was taken in 2020. Why wasn't it taken before, given that this source had been around for a decade? As it turns out, it was taken before. It was taken in the 1st of March 2017. Not this part. A statement was taken on the 1st of March 2017. We don't know what was in that statement, but I'm betting that it doesn't have any of the details of this. And I'll tell you why I'm betting that, because if it did, we'd be hearing about that one, because that's closer to the events. March the 1st, 2017 is really soon after these alleged events occurred. So from an evidentiary point of view, any statement made on March the 1st, 2017 would override any statement made on the 26th of June, 2020, right? But we're not hearing about that one. So my guess is that he didn't mention these details on the 1st of March, 2017, but he did mention some details on the 1st of March, 2017. We don't know what they are. The reason why I know he mentioned some details is because I know how this report came about. And how it came about was during the impeachment of Trump, there was an effort made to look through Hunter Biden's dealings in the past with Ukraine to see if they could find anything. The Pittsburgh FBI office went for a bit of a hunt, and they turned up the CHS's report from the 1st of March 2017, and they thought it was worth exploring again. And that's why they re-interviewed him in 2020. So this came as a result of people in the FBI trying to dig up dirt on Hunter Biden. Now, whether they affected the kind of questions they asked, whether they affected the tone of the investigation, whether they affected, we don't know. We don't know any of these things. But I could see investigators putting their thumb on the scales a little bit as being an explanation for why this source might have been dredging up events that he wasn't 100% sure about, but his memory is kind of vague. Maybe he meant this, maybe I'm not throwing mud at him. I'm just saying that is worth taking into consideration, that the context in which he was being interviewed again. Okay, so I just want to note that. I should also say that the Pittsburgh FBI office, which a number of people from the left and from the FBI have had doubts about, because Rudy Giuliani's been tied to the Pittsburgh FBI office. But the Pittsburgh FBI office did confirm that the source's travel receipts and rendezvous records matched what was outlined in the FD 1023. So he certainly didn't make it up out of whole cloth, if we trust the Pittsburgh FBI office. And even though they are tied somewhat to Rudy Giuliani, I do believe that they wouldn't be so corrupt that they would lie about that. So I believe them on that. The source's handler also corroborated that he met Alexander Ostapenko at the time he said he did in the FD 1023. Well, I didn't talk about what Ostapenko said, but it matches, right? So if there were things he was saying that weren't true, it wasn't completely made up. It wasn't fictional, right? It was at worst he shaded the truth at worst. Okay, so let's just be clear about that. Sorry?
I should say I did, just for the purposes of the thought exercise, outline all the possible explanations for the statement, but I don't think that one's on either extreme, that the FBI source made it up entirely and is just a liar, or that Joe Biden knowingly got a $5 million corrupt payment. I think both of those are the two least likely explanations, and it's almost certainly one of the ones in the middle.
Yeah. I should also say that Giuliani tried to get Lev Parnas, who was one of his henchmen. You might recall Lev Parnas during the first impeachment. He's one of his goons. to explore corruption issues with Zlochevsky and the Bidens in spring 2019. That's before the FD 1023. Parnas writes about that, and this is just a letter, but he says he'll go under oath if he's asked to. No one's asked him to go under oath, interestingly. He says, Giuliani and Solomon came up with a series of 12 to 14 questions about the Bidens that we would propose to Zlochevsky. Eventually, we managed to get Zlochevsky's answers back. His answers gave us nothing because there was nothing. On reading Zlochevsky's reply, Giuliani turned red and yelled, "What is this shit? This is bullshit. Make sure nobody sees this. Bury this," he says, which sounds very Giuliani. That does ring true.
Sound like a good faith hunt for the truth.
It doesn't mean that Zlochevsky told them the truth, though. Zlochevsky could have lied to them. Obviously, when he's talking about $5 million bribes, maybe he did. Maybe he found Rudy Giuliani and Lev Parnas untrustworthy. I can't imagine why. Anyway, but I should just note that was before the FD 1023. Zlochevsky at least wasn't telling Lev Parnas any of what he said into the source in the FD 1023. One more thing, there's an email supposedly confirming the FD 1023 from Hunter Biden, which we should talk about. This was turned up by Ziegler, who was one of the whistleblowers who we're about to talk about, that he thought might back up the FD 1023. The email is from Hunter to Devon Archer, and it says, need to determine what we consider expenses to be deducted from potential Burisma pay, pays in inverted commas, before we determine true split number with Alex, i.e. 5 minus 0.75 divided by 3 equals 1.42 M apiece. So Ziegler thought the 5 might be a reference to 5 million. May well be. That's interesting, isn't it? Dividing up inverted commas pay, that is 5 million, exactly the same number that was in the FD 1023. Why am I sounding like this with this tone? The reason why is because the date of the email is the May the 7th, 2014. Shokin became Prosecutor General on 10th of February 2015. The guy before him was universally considered to be corrupt and to not care about Burisma at all. Right? So, but you might go, well, hang on, maybe it was that maybe they just wanted to get rid of the charges then anyway, because the charges were still there then. Maybe. Except for, remember, in the FD 1023, they explicitly said the $5 million was to fire Shokin. They explicitly said Shokin, the word Shokin, right? And he wasn't the Prosecutor General at the time that email was sent. He wouldn't be for another year. So I think that email was about something else. It might be about their actual pay. Like maybe when they had that meeting at Lake Como, they said, we'll hire you for a while for $5 million worth over the years, which is about what they got in the end. It wasn't exactly what they got, but it was about what they got. I don't know. It might be, I don't know what it is. All I know is it's not about firing Shokin. I know that. So I'll just throw that out there as well. Anything else you want to add on the FD 1023? No? Okay, well, I'm going to say goodbye to you again for a second, and then we're going to see you later on to talk about the cover-up. Okay, Melina's disappearing again for a little while. I'll paste her back in soon. Then we have a text from Hunter Biden to his daughter, Naomi Biden, in January 2019. I hope, this is what he said in his text, I hope you can all do what I did and pay for everything for this entire family for 30 years. It's really hard, but don't worry. Unlike Pop, I won't make you give me half your salary, he says. Now, do we believe that? No. I mean, look, if that's true, that's a confession. But it's obviously not true. 30 years from 2019 is 1989. Hunter Biden didn't even finish college until 1996. So that doesn't make any sense at all. Well, he was paying for half his family's salary in high school. It's obvious bullshit. Like I said to you on other occasions, Hunter Biden had a massive victim complex. He was whinging and whining all the time like a martyr, complaining about having to do this, having to do that. This is just in keeping with his attitude. Now, maybe it's an indication that he paid for some things, and I'm about to say some of the things. Maybe it's a window into something they should be investigating, but I want to see the transfers before, I want to see the payments and the transfers before I draw any conclusions from this, because Hunter Biden is often full of shit. So that's all I have to say about that. Okay, so let's talk about some of these payments that Hunter Biden has made, because he has. In 2010, and there's an email to Hunter from Eric Schwerin, the bookkeeper, detailing some of Hunter's expenditures, including maintenance on Joe Biden's lakefront mansion in Wilmington. According to New York Post, quote, there were $1,239 in repairs. This is an email from Schwerin to Hunter Biden. There are $1,239 in repairs to an air conditioner at Mum's cottage, Mum, and another $1,475 to a painter for back wall and columns at the lake house. There was also $2,600 for fixing up a stone retaining wall at the lake and $475 for shutters. Later that month, in 2010, before any of this, Schwerin writes, Mike Christopher, he's a construction worker that Joe had hired, is hassling me, so I'm paying a couple of the small things as I haven't heard from your dad. No, he's busy, so it's okay. But if you think he has a moment or two to review the email I sent you, let me know. So that's implying it's coming from Hunter's money. June 10, 2010, Schwerin wrote, your dad's Delaware tax refund check came today. I'm depositing it in his account and writing a check in that amount back to you since he owes it to you. Okay, so he's paying Hunter back for some of the expenses. There seems to be a lot of this. Biden's paying for other Bidens and then paying them back. Do we care? I don't think so. This is before any of this stuff happened, and it's not in large enough amounts to be indicative of anything. It's just a few $1,000s. If anything, it helps them later on because it sets a pattern that they do pay for each other, but not in big enough amounts that are going to be concerning me. Did Joe and Hunter share a bank account? Because if they shared a bank account, then maybe the money going into Hunter's account was going to Joe Biden without it having to be transferred. So that's an important question. There is evidence that they shared a bank account. According to New York Post, Secret Service reportedly visited Hunter immediately after he accidentally sent $25,000 to a prostitute to tell him, quote, this is linked to Celtics account. That's the Secret Service's code name for Joe Biden. Although this was a Secret Service person saying that to him when they were going, what's going on, dude? This is linked to Celtics account. They might have been talking about this is linked to his bank account. They might have been saying, we're asking because you're linked to his Secret Service account. At the time, they were asking questions and Hunter was going, yeah, don't worry, I'm all good, don't worry. And he's basically fobbing them off. And they were saying, no, open the door, let us in, let's find out what's going on here. Because this is linked to Celtics account. So maybe they were saying this is linked to his Secret Service account. It's our responsibility to get to the bottom of these suspicious activities. Or they're saying it's his bank account. We don't know. In a 2018 email to one of his assistants, Hunter complained he'd been shut out of his bank account because his father had been using it. Quote, too many cooks in the kitchen, too many profile changes and such. Happened 10 days ago too. My dad has been using most lines on this account, which I've, through the gracious offerings of Eric Schwerin, have paid for past 11 years. So that suggests they are sharing an account. And I think they are sharing an account. That's what I take out of that. How much money went through that account? How much money went to Joe Biden? Well, that's something for the Republicans to point out. If they can get to the bottom of that, I'm all ears. So that is a legitimate area of exploration. So far, we've heard nothing else about that. I think they should be exploring that. That's potentially dodgy. And finally, in this section, we have a bunch of loans that Joe Biden made allegedly to his family members who were then paid back, and the proceeds came from dubious means. Firstly, there's a claim from March 1st, 2018, where Joe received a $200,000 check from James's dubious influence peddling. And that is true. That is true. James had basically ripped off, we'd gotten $200,000 from AmeriCorp, which was a failing company, hoping that James would open doors for them as a Biden. He actually got $600,000 in loans from them, from this failing company. Had nothing to do with Joe Biden, though. other than the fact that James Biden was using Joe Biden's name, as all these people seem to do. And James was actually repaying a loan in this case. When he paid that $200,000 to Joe Biden, they wrote on the memo line loan repayment, which is fair enough. But there's also bank records to prove that Joe Biden did make the loan. The Republicans have them. January 12th, 2018. So that's a month and a half beforehand. We see Joe Biden's lawyer paying $200,000 to Jim Biden. And then a month and a half later, he pays it back. So it was a loan. We have no evidence to think otherwise. James Comer says, even if this was a personal loan repayment, it's still troubling that Joe Biden's ability to be paid back by his brother depended on the success of his family's shady financial dealings. But is it? Is it concerning? I mean, what, are we suggesting that Joe Biden was dodgy because he lent his brother money that his brother eventually paid back to him from a dubious means, so that Joe was all square, so Joe didn't make any money out of it at all? This is a weird narrative. I don't see how this affects Joe Biden at all. Like, it's got nothing to do with him. It's about James Biden. There's a second example. James Biden paid back a $40,000 loan to Joe Biden from his bank account 21 days after Hunter had received a $150,000 wire from CEFC. And sorry, my fault. Hunter sent $150,000 to Jim and Sarah Biden, his wife, from CEFC. Sarah Biden then transferred $50,000 into their personal checking account. And from that, they paid Joe Biden $40,000. And to be clear, this money came directly from the Chinese company, okay? They had, after they paid Joe, they had $46.88 in that account, okay? Before the $150,000 was transferred into the Lion Hall group account, which was the Jim and Sarah combined account, that account only had a balance of $1,900, okay? So the money for the loan repayment came from CEFC, effectively. Also note, $40,000 is exactly 10% of the $400,000 the Hunter transferred into his account into his personal account from CEFC a month earlier, before he divvied it up. Remember, 10% for the big guy? Remember that? That's 10%. Let's hear what Mike Johnson has to say about this.
These checks are to Joe Biden. One is for $40,000 from China.
It came direct from China, and it was 10%. Don't forget that. Well, it was also a loan. It said loan repayment on the memo. They had the bank records proving that Joe Biden had loaned $40,000 in July the 28th, and the same amount was sent back on the 3rd of September. None of the, as far as the 10% goes, none of the other ratios for that money matched the big guy email. Like, Jim didn't have the same ratio. Hunter didn't have the same ratio. It's just a coincidence that Joe Biden had that ratio. It's just paying back a loan, okay? This is lame. And let's hear what Melina has to say about this.
They're like, look, here's evidence. It's money going into Joe's account. And it's like, okay, from his brother, who he has given the loan to. Like, I imagine Joe has more money, whatever, they can explain why they're giving loans to each other and how that's above board. But just receiving money from his brother doesn't mean that it's, like, I'm sure there are records that that's a loan. And even if that money is tainted, even if James got that money illegally, it doesn't therefore implicate Joe as being involved. Like, if it's a repayment of a loan, it's not him profiting from a business venture. The money needs to be money he got through these businesses, not through people who work in those businesses. So that just seems like really comical to like hold those things up as proof of anything relevant.
Thank you, the ghost of Melina. And then finally, we got a loan from Hunter Biden. Sorry, a loan involving Hunter Biden. Hunter's businesses made direct monthly payments to Joe Biden. in 2018. This is the claim.
Today, the House Oversight Committee is releasing subpoenaed bank records that show Hunter Biden's business entity, Owasco PC, made direct monthly payments to Joe Biden. This wasn't a payment from Hunter Biden's personal account, but an account for his corporation that received payments from China and other shady corners of the world.
It already sounds bad whenever James Comer says something, doesn't it? Hunter's personal assistant, we got an email from Hunter's personal assistant, 14th of January 2019, to Hunter Biden, reminding him of a $1,380 payment that he's meant to make every month for his truck. It's just Hunter Biden paying Joe Biden for a truck that Joe Biden bought for him. Joe Biden made some repayments for Hunter Biden, and Hunter Biden's paying him back. That's what it is. That's what the email says. $1,380 isn't very much. I doubt it's a corrupt payment or even a micro payment. James Comer says, you can loan people money. If they pay you back, then you benefit directly from the influence peddling. When my son needs help or my daughter who's in college needs it, I just give her money. Nobody ever pays me back. Yeah, they're in college. They're not a 45-year-old man who makes millions of dollars. Duh. Anyway, I should say one thing. Joe doesn't have to benefit for this to be corruption. Like, according to the Resource Guide to the U.S. Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, quote, companies also may violate the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act if they give payments or gifts to third parties, such as officials' family members, as an indirect way of corruptly influencing a foreign official. So Joe didn't have to make money. Hunter's money might have been enough for Joe to be impugned with corruption. But what you need is for Joe to do something. What did Joe do? It's not, he had to commit an official act. Either Joe has to have profited or he has to have done something corrupt in order to accuse him of corruption. If Hunter Biden tried to get him to do corrupt things and he didn't, you can't point to anything Joe Biden did that could have led to Hunter Biden making money. And you can't point or anything like official, like I'm not talking about being on the speakerphone and saying hi and talking about the weather. It's like I'm trying to say big. If you can't point to something he did that was actually official, that led to Hunter Biden making untoward corrupt money, and Joe didn't profit, then he's got no case to answer in my book. Should he be impeached? No. So my conclusion about should he be impeached is I look at my list of what I've got here. The things that maybe smell are Hunter Biden's speakerphone calls, depending on the context. Let's find out. Sharing Hunter Biden's bank account, that maybe smells. Let's find the details of that. Joe not knowing, saying he doesn't know Hunter's business, that definitely smells, but I don't think it's impeachable. It's just a lie. I don't have anything else involving Joe Biden. Hunter, I've got the Ballerina turning up to Cafe Melina twice. I've got the Kazakh sports car. I've got the third part of the CEFC deal when he took $5 million. We don't know what he did with that. But the FARA violations, to me, are a blinking red light. I think he almost certainly should be charged for them, but I know they're being investigated. The Mexican deal maybe smells as well for Hunter. Hunter being on the Burisma board definitely smells. The BHR stuff with China early on, that smells. Hunter sending a letter to Lysenko with Burisma, that smells. Trying to get UN Secretary General appointed to be his mate, that really smells. There's lots of stuff that smells of Hunter. But for Joe, it's just not knowing Hunter's business, the speakerphone calls, and Joe sharing Hunter's bank account, in my view. And they should be investigated. But that's not impeachment worthy, in my view. Okay, now the last thing we've got to talk about is a potential cover-up, because that's something which people have been talking about. The Republicans have been talking about this a lot. Right off the bat, we've seen zero evidence that Joe Biden has himself had any contact with anyone over this case. Okay, so let's be very clear about this. If there's a cover-up, there's no evidence Joe Biden is involved. He doesn't have to be, though. Maybe people trying to help Joe Biden out are doing the covering up because they're part of his administration. I can totally see that. Or maybe Joe Biden did tell them, but just quietly, and we don't have any evidence. Maybe. The issue, though, is more on Merrick Garland, because Merrick Garland was less than convincing when asked under oath whether he'd spoken to the FBI about the Hunter Biden case.
Let me just get right to the chase. Has anyone from the White House provided direction at any time to you personally or to any senior officials at the DOJ regarding how the Hunter Biden investigation was to be carried out?
No.
Have you had personal contact with anyone at FBI headquarters about the Hunter Biden investigation?
I don't recollect the answer to that question, but the FBI works for the Justice Department. It's.
I'm sorry. You don't recollect. You don't recollect whether you've talked with anybody at FBI headquarters about an investigation of the president's son?
I don't believe that I did. I promised the Senate when I came before it for confirmation that I would leave Mr. Weiss in place and that I would not interfere with his investigation.
Okay. Did you ever?
I have kept that promise.
All right. Have you had personal contact with anybody at the Baltimore field office on the Hunter Biden matter?
No.
To see how definitive he was for the other two cases, but for FBI, I can't recall. Just evades my memory. Not convincing. But before we talk about Merrick Garland, let's talk about the point person a lot of this goes through, and that's Assistant U.S. Attorney Leslie Wolf. She's a senior prosecutor in Delaware. She came up again and again in whistleblowers' testimony. There are two IRS whistleblowers who are working on the Hunter Biden case who felt that their investigation was stymied by Leslie Wolf, amongst other people. There's a few examples here. When interviewing Hunter Biden, trying to interview Hunter Biden, they were trying to surprise him with an interview. But they couldn't surprise him because he had Secret Service. This is December the 7th, 2020. Okay, he had Secret Service looking after him. So the FBI supervising special agent wanted to interview Hunter. He says, quote, "At least for the purpose of this, Hunter Biden had armed Secret Service protection, providing protection at the direction of whomever. We knew we couldn't just, go to the door, or I certainly believe that we couldn't go to the door. So that there would have to be some notification to Secret Service so they would be aware that we were coming. The initial plan was to have the local field office of the Secret Service be notified the morning of, to diminish opportunities for anybody else to be notified. I was working with my management on that, as well as headquarters, our FBI headquarters. I was notified by my assistant special agent in charge that we would not even be allowed to approach the house. That the plan, as told to us, was that my information would be given to the Secret Service and to stand by. Majority Counsel says, and were you able to interview Hunter Biden? The FBI person says, I was not. Note, by the way, if he had interviewed Hunter Biden, he probably would have taken the fifth. That's the obvious thing to do. So he wasn't going to get much out of him anyway, but he was prevented from interviewing Hunter Biden by this messing around with Secret Service. And he says that has never happened to him before. I don't know how many times he's interviewed someone who had Secret Service before. Probably none. But yeah. Anyway, that's there. Then on December 2020 as well, Supervisory Special Agent Shapley, the guy, one of the whistleblowers, said that Leslie Wolf, quote, said she did not want to ask questions about Dad. Wolf also said it will get us into hot water if we interview the president's grandchildren. She told investigators to not make any reference to, quote, the big guy during key interviews related to the probe into Hunter's alleged tax crimes because there was, quote, no specific criminality to that line of questioning. They obviously had the big guy email at that point in time. And this is also after she'd been briefed on the contents of the FD 1023, which suggested that Joe might have taken $5 million in bribes. So that was interesting. Shapley also testified that after an electronic search warrant on Hunter Biden's Apple iCloud led us to WhatsApp messages with several CEFC China energy executives where he claimed to be sitting and discussing business with his father, Joe Biden. You remember that one? We talked about that. We sought permission to follow up on the information and the messages. Prosecutors would not allow it. Around this time, a search warrant for the guest house at the Biden's Delaware residence was being planned. Yet despite agreeing there was probable cause, AUSA Wolf cited the optics of executing a search warrant at President Biden's residency as the deciding factor for not allowing it to be completed. And also August 2020, there was an email to investigators where Wolf stated that a section of a drafted warrant needed to be redone because it included Joe Biden. I'm not sure what this is cut and pasted from, she said, but other than the attribution, location, identity stuff at the end, none of it's appropriate and within the scope of this warrant. There should be nothing about political figure one in here. Political figure one was Joe Biden. Note, everything I just told you happened while Trump was president. Everything. Okay? So that's the first thing to note. Second thing, there's a defense for Wolf, and that is she was not the only one concerned about interviews and warrants. In November 9, 2020, there was a one-page summary of the investigation written for the IRS Deputy Commissioner. Quote, to date, no proactive interviews have occurred as a result of guidance provided to the investigative team by the USAO in Delaware. That's the US Attorney's Office in Delaware, so Wolf. DOJ Tax Principal Associate Deputy Attorney General, so that's a Trump official in the Department of Justice, and the Deputy Attorney General's Office. It's a Trump Deputy Attorney General. So it wasn't just Weiss, it wasn't just Wolf, it was Trump's Deputy Attorney General running interference on Joe Biden interviews and stuff that might interfere with Joe Biden. That's the guidance they're talking about. Leslie Wolf may well have just been following orders from Trump's people. And you can see why they wouldn't want to get involved in politics. That makes perfect sense. It's an election year. This is just before the election. Just before the election. It makes perfect sense that they be treading carefully at this point in time. The next thing they've been accused of is being lax on the FD 1023. That's the $5 million. That's the Zelkevsky interview from a source suggesting that Joe Biden might have been bribed with $5 million to sack Shokin. In this case, Wolf was one out. Wolf had refused to accept a briefing from the Pittsburgh office about the FD 1023 until ordered to do so by the Principal Associate Deputy Attorney General. According to Shapley, Wolf wanted nothing to do with it because she believed that no information from that office could be trusted because it probably originated from Rudy Giuliani. Like I said, Rudy Giuliani had links to this office. So Brady, the guy who'd done the fact check on the FD 1023 from Pittsburgh FBI, tried to convince her otherwise in detail about what he did. He said, look, I did this and I did this and I did this. There's nothing to do with Rudy Giuliani. And he had his recommendations. They were in a detailed final report, and he submitted it to Donahue, who's the Deputy Attorney General, in September 2020. Donahue concurred with his recommendation. And he said that you should brief Weiss's team, which Leslie Wolf did not want to happen. Then he briefed David Weiss's team. David Weiss is the guy investigating Joe Biden. And Hunter Biden, sorry. And David Weiss's office allegedly then hid the very existence of the FD 1023 from everyone except for the people in that briefing. They buried it. And include the whistleblowers. The two whistleblowers testified they didn't even learn of the existence of the FD 1023 until Bill Barr publicly confirmed that he had sent the information to Delaware for further investigation. They also testified that portions of Hunter Biden's laptop were withheld from them, even though they were investigating. They were the guys piling through all this stuff, trying to investigate Hunter Biden. They didn't have his whole laptop. And they said both those burials got in the way of their investigation. So they were quite angry about that. Now, Bill Barr says for the FD 1023, Pittsburgh determined there was no basis to believe this was disinformation and that the information should be followed up on, and therefore they sent it to Delaware, that's the investigation into Joe Biden, where there was an ongoing investigation to follow up on it. So he's not saying it should be buried. He's saying they should have followed up on it. So, is there a cover-up on this? Maybe. I hate this. I think this should have been properly investigated. I mean, I think the FD 1023 probably isn't going anywhere, but should be investigated. They should have tried to find those recordings, at the very least. If Weiss didn't want to investigate, then someone should have investigated. Like that is at the very least a credible corruption claim. That should be investigated. So I don't know if it's a cover-up. Maybe Wolf and Weiss were just too skeptical of anything Rudy Giuliani might have been involved with. It might have been a bad judgment call from them, but I think it's a bad call. That investigation should have happened into the FD 1023. I think everyone should have known about it, personally. Also, investigators were accused of being lax on Bobulinski. Remember Tony Bobulinski, who was very briefly potentially in business with Joe Biden about China in 2017. This is what Tucker Carlson had to say, or what Bobulinski had to say to Tucker Carlson.
Tim Tebow, in his last discussion with my legal counsel, was, listen, we know Tony's cooperating. We appreciate all the information he's provided. We will follow up with you. We're definitely going to have him come in for a follow-up interview or spend some more time on this. And I haven't heard from him since.
At all?
No. Nor have my lawyers.
No communication whatsoever?
No.
Since before the 2020 election?
Correct.
That's shocking.
Shocking, yeah, that would be one adjective.
Tucker Carlson was appalled by this. It was appalling. But we know more about Bobulinski now. There might be a reason why the FBI didn't call Bobulinski back. Everything we've told you about Bobulinski, they probably knew. They have location trackers. They know where people are at any given time. They'd know if he was at that Miami meeting or not, or if he was even in Miami when the Miami meeting occurred. They would know that. So maybe they called him out on bullshit and they said, well, we don't care about this guy. Maybe. Maybe the best thing that ever happened to Bobulinski is that they didn't interview him under oath, because now he might be going to jail if they had been. I'm not too worried about what happened to Bobulinski, about them being lax on Bobulinski. Okay, so then we've got, so that's the investigation part about whether that's the information we got about whether they were stymieing the investigation. Now we've got charging issues of charging, right? The first thing that we need to say about this is whenever anyone talks about David Weiss, who's the person who allegedly came up with these charges, or lack thereof, people always say, well, he's appointed by Trump. He was appointed by Trump, and he's continued to be there. Joe Biden kept him going and said, I wasn't messing with him. I just let him do his thing. He's a Trump appointee. He is. But he was recommended by Delaware's two Democratic senators, Chris Coons and Tom Carper, under the Senate's blue slip policy, they call it, where the senators from the district have something to say about the U.S. attorney who was appointed for that district, or in that case for that state. So the Democratic senators recommended him, and then Trump appointed him. Also, as U.S. Attorney for Delaware, he was deeply connected to the Delaware political establishment. In fact, he had previously worked with Beau Biden, Hunter's brother. And so he had his fingers in the pie in Delaware. It's potential, even though he was appointed by Trump, they could have been trying to put his thumb on the scales for Joe Biden, potentially. Let's look at these charging issues, shall we? Ziegler, who was one of the whistleblowers, one of the IRS whistleblowers, says, in August of 2022, we had a phone call with all of the assigned prosecutors, and they had said that all four of them were recommending the approval of felony and misdemeanor tax charges. Ziegler said that his direct supervisors disagreed with his conclusion about the strength of the case against Biden. He said, quote, "That was a huge disagreement. I met with top officials on presenting the evidence and presenting the case, and at the end of the day, it was still a no." Ziegler says that David Weiss told him he agreed with him that certain felony charges should be applied, but there was resistance from other officials inside the Department of Justice who thought a jury might be sympathetic to Hunter Biden's drug addiction and the death of his brother, Beau Biden. Sounds to me like there's some cherry picking going on here. Sometimes people were saying he should be charged. Sometimes they were saying he shouldn't. Ziegler is looking at times when they say he shouldn't, going, look, he should have been charged. But other times they say he shouldn't. I don't think there's any evidence of any corruption there. That's different people had different opinions at different times. Okay. And many of these arguments happened when Trump was president. Don't forget that. A lot of these arguments happened when Trump was president. Also, both Ziegler and Shapley, the two whistleblowers, acknowledged that charging decision disagreements are very common. Shapley said it happens in 90+% of his work. And I believe that because he seems to be a guy who wets the bed a bit. So I'm sure that he does disagree with charging decisions a lot. In particular, there's a focus on that they let the 2014 charges lapse. There were 2014 tax charges and 2017-18 tax charges. The plea bargain that they ended up going for, or trying to go for, involved the 2017-18 tax charges. Shapley said that Weiss deliberately waited out the statute of limitations related to the 2014-15 financial crimes. He said, quote, "In November of 2022, the statute of limitations was set to expire for the 2014 and 2015 charges in DC, which include the 2014 felonies for the attempt to evade or defeat tax and fraud or false statement regarding Burisma income earned by Hunter Biden in those years. The statute of limitations had been extended through a tolling agreement with Hunter Biden's defense counsel, and they were willing to extend it past 2022. Weiss allowed those to expire," he said. But Weiss didn't allow them to expire. He didn't let them lapse. He chose not to charge them. How do we know? Because Shapley told us that. August the 17th, he told us in 2022 in a memo. We again pushed back on not charging 2014-2015. DOJ tax continues the position that the defenses, brackets, load taxes paid by another person on half the income would make it too complex for the jury. I believe their position is unsupportable, both considering precedent and evidence. I made it clear not only do we disagree with that position, but that we could provide countless prosecution recommendations that included diverted income to nominees and various loan claims to support our position. The USA agrees, the US attorney agrees with us, but then talks to DOJ tax and they convince him otherwise. This has happened a couple of times. He said in August before the agreement lapsed. So he could see that, and this is consistent with what Ziegler was saying. By the way, when they say load taxes paid by another person, they mean Devon Archer paid some of those taxes. We'll get to that in a second. This confirms what Ziegler said before about them going back and forth, and Ziegler saying, I have the evidence that we should go for it, but that they were saying no. His superior officers were saying no. So they knew this was not these charges were not allowed to lapse. They knew they opted to not charge him. They chose to not charge him. Then we have Shapley's notes from October 7th, 2022, in a meeting, a very critical meeting, which I'll tell you why in a second. He wrote that Weiss said, these are his handwritten notes during the meeting, not going to charge 14/15. There's nothing clearer than that. Not going to charge. Not I'm going to let them lapse, and we're not sure. We'll see. We'll let them lapse maybe. Oh, we'll see. Well, we ran out of time. No, I've made a decision. We're not going to charge him for them. Why? According to Shapley's notes, part of the taxes were already paid by Devon Archer, like I just said. In his notes, he said that there was going to be confusion created by this, and that Beau died in the middle of the years, and so there'd be sympathy. This is consistent with what we've already heard. Sympathy from the jury, confusion from the jury. So you can disagree with those charging decisions, but they're not irrational. And they're certainly not so irrational that this is evidence of corruption and a cover-up. Weiss, according to the New York Times, was actually considering letting Hunter off completely at one point in time. There was a drafted deal on May the 18th, 2023, when Biden would admit that he was late filing his taxes for 2017 and 2018. He owned a gun while he was using drugs. He would promise to pay any taxes he still owed, to pay his taxes on time for the next 5 years, and to never own a gun again. And that would be it. There would be no charges. But then around that time, the IRS whistleblowers went public, and Weiss suddenly demanded that Biden plead guilty to committing tax offenses. Does that mean he was corrupt? Does that mean he was corruptly going to let him go and then he thought he couldn't get away with it? No, I think what this reflects is that he was under a lot of political pressure, both ways. And he was. We were there, we remember. He was under huge political pressure all over the place. And so he was panicking. And I mean, whatever was going to happen, Hunter was not going to get much. And he shouldn't get much. Like, most people don't, we'll get into the details of this, but most people in his position would not get much, if anything. But he was flipping back and forth between a plea bargain that was not much or just letting him off. He was never considering applying charges at this point in time, like serious charges. So, I mean, you can draw your own conclusions. Me personally, I don't see this as evidence for corruption. Melina, let's take you from the white flash. What do you say?
About the plea deal, obviously the big talking point with it is whether it was a sweetheart deal or not. The right says yes, the left says no. I would just say with this, and I find this is the case with a lot of aspects of, all the allegations around Hunter, a lot of these things I think can be explained in opposite ways depending on what motive you take as your starting point. So in the case of the plea deal and the collapse of it, was the plea deal generous because they were being pressured to protect Hunter Biden from a fair prosecution? Or was it generous because they were being pressured into prosecuting him and trying to make something stick when people wouldn't normally prosecute this kind of case? And I'm sure that you will either before or after this get into the statistics about how unusual it is for these kinds of crimes to be prosecuted in this way. And I don't know the answer to that because I don't know all the details of where pressure was coming from, against who, and how influential that was. But you can explain a completely different universe one way or the other way, depending on what you're going to take as a starting motive. And I think that explains a little bit of why politically the sides are so far apart in terms of trying to understand the reality of this situation.
That was Melina. Now, so what ended up happening was they ended up going for a plea deal. They tried to get Hunter to plead guilty to 2 tax misdemeanors with no jail time. A guns felony would remain, but after a 2-year diversion program, that would require him to avoid drugs and firearms. The charge would disappear. So you just have to pay his taxes and plead guilty to a misdemeanor. Was that a sweetheart deal? Well, most people don't face charges for that level of tax offense. You just pay the taxes you owe, and that's it. That's what happens to pretty much everyone. As far as the guns charges go, a Syracuse University study found that from 2013 to 2017, the DOJ brought a total of 35,000 prosecutions with a firearm charge as the lead charge in their indictment. Of those, 26,717 were felon in possession charges. Only 614 out of 35,000 involved the charge for unlawful shipment, transfer, receipt, or possession of a firearm by a drug addict. And those 614, those weren't the only charges. Those charges were often paired with other charges. In Hunter Biden's case, that was all they were trying to get him for. So it was less than 614 out of 35,000 charges were relevant to Hunter Biden. So it was unusual. It was an unusual charge. Having said that, if he was charged under federal sentencing guidelines, his recommended sentence would have been 10 to 16 months. And he got a plea bargain, 0 jail. So what I would say is that depending on how you look at it, it was charging him at all and having the plea bargain at all was very harsh on Hunter Biden. But once you got to that position, once you're actually charged, his actual deal was pretty generous. So it depends how you look at it. Certainly to me, it's not a clear-cut case of a cover-up or corruption. The plea agreement was then rejected by the judge, Judge Mary Ellen Noreika. She's nominated by Trump, but supported by lots of Democrats. She donated in a bipartisan fashion as well. She had concerns about the way the deal was structured. I'm not going to waste your time on that. These were technical legal concerns, but they were valid. They were fair concerns. That's not why it fell apart anyway. The reason the plea deal fell apart was because she asked prosecutors if Biden would be immune from prosecution for possible FARA charges. I already told you about them. At one point in time, Noreika asked Justice Department Prosecutor Leo Wise whether there is an ongoing investigation here. There is, Wise said, adding that he could not tell the judge what the investigation was. Noreika asked if the government could potentially bring a charge related to the Foreign Agents Registration Act, FARA, to which Wise replied, yes. At that point, the original plea deal broke down. Defense attorney Chris Clark said he could not agree with that. Then there's no deal, Wise said. Clark countered, as far as I'm concerned, the plea deal is null and void. So it broke down over how broad the immunity agreement was. The conservative argument about the plea deal is that the immunity agreement was way too broad. Included in the agreement was a provision where, quote, the United States agrees not to criminally prosecute Biden outside the terms of this agreement for any federal crimes encompassed by the attached statement of facts. Any federal crimes encompassed by the attached statement of facts. They attached a statement of facts. That included Hunter's role with Burisma, with the Chinese companies, many of the companies he used to take money from. In other words, if Hunter were to complete probation, this pre-trial diversion agreement might prevent the DOJ from ever bringing charges against Hunter for any crimes related to foreign influence peddling in China, Ukraine, anywhere whatsoever, and any of the money he received. That depends on your interpretation. Those elements were mentioned in the statement of facts, but were they mentioned as crimes? I could see a court saying they're not crimes there. They're just casual mentions. I don't know. I could see the argument made that this would make them immune, although all his dealings. I could see the argument made that it wouldn't make him immune. Depends on the judge, I would say. But anyway, those are their complaints. I mean, look, let's be clear. The plea bargain was unusual in a lot of ways. Technically, it was very unusual the way it was drafted. But this is an unusual case. You can see them shitting bricks in this situation. So they knew it was going to be scrutinised. They knew they were going to be under huge amounts of pressure. It's no surprise it was structured in a strange way. Can we prove conclusively they were trying to cover things up? I don't think we can. It's possible. It's possible. But there's a lot of plausible deniability there, I think. So anyway, they're their complaints. But what Republicans are focused almost entirely on is whether it's Weiss doing the covering up, if there's a cover-up, or if it's someone above him doing the cover-up, in particular Merrick Garland. This is why they're obsessed with the phrase, are you the decision-making official when it comes to Weiss? Was he the one making all the decisions I just told you about? Or someone below him? Or was it someone above him? Was it Merrick Garland telling him to offer sweetheart deals? Was it Merrick Garland telling him to maybe drop charges? Was it Merrick Garland telling him to, no, let's not have Joe Biden being investigated. Let's not have any search warrants for Hunter. Was it Merrick Garland? This is an example of Jim Jordan talking about David Weiss's many positions about whether he was the charging authority or not. Was he the ultimate official making decisions, or was he subject to other officials? This is what Jim Jordan has to say.
June 7th, he said this, I have been granted ultimate authority over the matter, including responsibility for deciding where, when, and whether to file charges. That's what the U.S. Attorney said on June 7th. 3 weeks later, Mr. Weiss wrote me again. And he said this, I stand by what I wrote, but I wish to expand. Wow, already changing his story 23 days later. And he said this, my charging authority is geographically limited to my home district. Well, wait a minute. You just told me 23 days before you have ultimate authority. Now you change it. Then again, on July 10th, Mr. Weiss wrote Senator Graham, and he said this, paragraph 2, to clarify, I have not requested special counsel designation. Rather, I had discussions with departmental officials. Mr. Weiss can't get his story straight. 3 different stories in a 5-week time frame. On June 7th, he's Tarzan. He's super. I got ultimate authority. I can do what I want, file charges where I want, when I want, and how I want. June 30th, well, actually, no, I can't. And then, of course, on July 10th, he says, to clarify, I haven't requested special counsel status, but I've been talking to the folks at Maine Justice. 3 different positions in a little over a month.
Okay, so that's all a bit confusing. But the important thing is, according to Jim Jordan, he had many different stories, David Weiss. By contrast, the whistleblower, Shapley, he had only one story. He attended this meeting on October 7th. He says Weiss said something different. He wrote in his handwritten notes, in his testimony, he said, yes, Weiss told me that he was not the deciding person in whether or not charges were filed. He told us that DC U.S. Attorney had declined to allow charges. He told us that he had requested special counsel authority from Maine DOJ. And Jim Jordan goes, and he was denied? Shapley says, that's correct. Jordan says, were you the only guy in that meeting? Shapley says, I was not. Jordan says, how many other people were there? Shapley says, there were 7 total people, including me. And he released his handwritten notes from the day, and they said, Weiss stated he is not the deciding person. So that sounds conclusive, except none of the other people in that meeting have testified to hearing Weiss say that. They've all testified. None of them remember Weiss saying that. There are also minor inconsistencies in Shapley's story because he has handwritten notes and he has what he typed down in more detail in a memo later that day. I think it was later that day. It might have been later that week. Let's look at the handwritten notes. I think they're the ones that are most important. They say, if California U.S. Attorney says no, Weiss will request approval to proceed about charges. Later, he paraphrased, he would have to request permission to bring charges. That's what he wrote later. Requesting approval to proceed is very different from having to request permission to bring charges. The reason why is because Weiss and Garland have maintained all along that if Weiss decided to bring charges outside Delaware and the local US attorneys didn't want to partner on the case, because normally you'd ask them to partner on the case with him, he could ask for special attorney authority and Garland would grant it. That's called Section 515 authority. We'll hear about that in a second. That is very consistent with what Weiss has tried to say to clear up the confusion. In a June 30 letter that Jim Jordan referred to before, he wrote, I have been assured that if necessary, after the above process, I would be granted Section 515 authority in the District of Columbia, the Central District of California, or any other district where charges could be brought in the matter. And that's also consistent with what Merrick Garland has been trying to say as well. This is a Republican, Russell Fry, getting very confused about who had the authority, who didn't have the authority. But if you listen to what Merrick Garland's trying to say, it's consistent with what I just told you.
When you say you have ultimate, when he wrote a letter on your behalf in June, I have ultimate authority. This is prior to the designation of special counsel. Ultimate to me means like that you can go wherever you want to.
Ultimate means
at that particular point, sir, could he file charges in the District of South Carolina? He would not have that ability, correct? He would have to go through that U.S. attorney. So that's not full authority.
All he would have to do is ask me for 515 authority, and I would sign it right away, just like when he asked me to be special counsel. Within 3 days, I signed that.
So he didn't have ultimate authority.
He had the authority because I promised that he would have the authority.
But he did not have that authority.
So Merrick Garland and Weiss have very consistently said, or tried to say, he didn't have the authority, just go on his own, just do whatever he liked without talking to anyone. But Garland had promised him If he asked for special attorney authority, he would have gotten it, which means effectively he is the person who will decide the charges, not Garland, not anyone else. It's up to him. If he asks to partner with someone, with another US attorney, and they say no, he will get the authority to do it himself. Garland has promised that to him. This to me seems really, really clear and obvious, but the Republicans are not getting their head around this. They're going, hang on, but then you're not the ultimate authority because you got to get authority from Garland. I think it's pretty obvious what they're saying. I really do. I don't know if they're playing dumb on purpose or if they're just dumb, but it's pretty obvious what they're saying. And that doesn't seem like Garland's involved. It doesn't. It seems like Garland at the beginning immunized himself to not be involved by saying, Weiss, whatever you want to do, I will let you do it. Guaranteed. That's what it sounds like to me. You make up your own mind. Anyway, this is why when Garland eventually appointed Weiss as a special counsel to give him more freedom to charge Hunter Biden, as he promised he would do if requested, Republicans said, we thought Weiss already had the authority to charge what he liked. And they pointed to seemingly a contradiction where Garland originally said this.
Mr. Weiss had, in fact, more authority than a special counsel would have. He has complete authority, as I said, to bring a case anywhere he wants in his discretion.
And then 2 months later, he said this about giving him special counsel authority.
On Tuesday of this week, Mr. Weiss advised me that in his judgment, his investigation had reached a stage at which he should continue his work as a special counsel, and he asked to be so appointed. Upon considering his request, as well as the extraordinary circumstances relating to this matter, I have concluded that it is in the public interest to appoint him as special counsel.
But once again, that is completely consistent with their story all along. It's just that once Weiss asked for the authority, he was given it. Weiss's final testimony on the matter is, I am and have been the decision maker on this case. I do not, however, make these decisions in a vacuum. I'm bound by federal law, the principles of federal prosecution and DOJ guidelines. As a result, there are processes I must adhere to in making investigative and charging decisions. These processes did not interfere with my decision-making authority. At no time was I blocked or otherwise prevented from pursuing charges or taking the steps necessary in the investigation by other United States attorneys, the tax division, or anyone else at the Department of Justice. Was there a cover-up? To me, there's no evidence. There's no evidence of this. There's evidence of decisions I wouldn't make. There's evidence of what I feel are poor decisions. Evidence of a cover-up, not nearly enough. And if there is a cover-up, it goes up to Weiss. I see no evidence other than Merrick Garland's dubious answer to one question, which I played you before. I see no evidence that Merrick Garland is involved at all if there's a cover-up. So if anyone's guilty, it's Weiss. I don't think anyone's guilty. So that's my view. My view is there's no cover-up. My view there's not enough for an impeachment. There's certainly enough for an impeachment inquiry. You can inquire all you like. You should have a standing investigation into the president. I think everyone should all the time. I think that's good. I think that's good government practice. Plenty of questions to follow up on. But to me, no grounds for impeachment. Melina, what's your thought? Should there be any impeachment about anything whatsoever?
Well, I'll listen to all the parts I missed and maybe I'll have a different opinion by the end of it. But I would say my overall question at this point, even after all of this, is there anything that has emerged since the election that significantly changes the story? And what I mean by that is we knew back during the election that Hunter did these jobs that he shouldn't have done and that he was dodgy and that Joe Biden probably was a little bit indulgent, a little bit lax, let some gray areas occur. But has any of the new information that's come out since then fundamentally changed anything? And nothing I've seen yet is a yes to that. Obviously, the investigations will continue. I'm open-minded. If something comes out that proves corruption, then I'm going to change my mind about whether there should be an impeachment. But I haven't seen anything yet that rises to that level. And frankly, I don't think that's partisan or controversial to say because most Republican congressmen and women say the same thing. They, for the most part, acknowledge that the impeachment is a fishing expedition to try and find evidence to justify an impeachment rather than there being evidence already that points to that as the right outcome. So I think, lots of people are being honest about where this is at. And at least at the time of recording, I think that's where I'm at with it too.
Fair enough. And for the record, I agree with you. I don't think there's anything wrong with a fishing expedition. I think they should have a fishing expedition. I think every president should have fishing expeditions against them to make sure they haven't done something impeachable. That fishing expedition should not be an impeachment trial. It should be a committee. They can call it the fishing committee for all I care, and they can spend their whole time holding hearings trying to find stuff. That's fine. Just don't lie about what you found, don't misrepresent it, and don't hold ridiculous, unnecessary impeachment trials for something where there is nothing there. Keep on searching until you find something and then hold your impeachment trial. So I have no problems with the pursuit. I just hope that this doesn't become an unnecessary and farcical impeachment trial, because impeachment trials are already on the verge of becoming farcical, and they could be about to become even more farcical, depending on what's happening over the next few weeks. But fish away, that's okay. Like you don't have to know what you're going to find before you look for it. Just look. That's okay. And end scene. I just had a look at how long I've been recording in total. And I can't tell exactly because I've got to chop this up so much and repaste it, but it looks like it's going to be somewhere between 5 and 6 hours long. I can't believe that. Joe Rogan would be tapping out at this point. Even he would be going, no, mercy, please stop it. I just wanted to get all the Hunter Biden stuff in one spot for you guys, because I know that before we come back, the impeachment trial may have begun. So I just wanted to be there waiting for you. And if this comes in handy, then great. Tell me, have you even gotten this far? Is there anyone still there? Just let me know. In comments, let me know if you got all the way through. What do you think of this? Is this useful to you? I'm curious. Let me know if you found this understandable at all, or useful at all, or is it just a cry for help in your view? During my holidays, I watch a lot of movies, and I've been doing that when I haven't been preparing this. I've been watching movies. I watched The Accountant the other day for the first time. The Accountant, that's a Ben Affleck movie. It's a really weird movie about like an action hero who's an accountant. He's an autistic guy. And he has, apart from, his jiu-jitsu moves, which I can't really relate to, he has this, because of his autism, he has this incredible forensic ability, but also a complete inability to stop until he's finished. He has to finish all the time. If he doesn't finish, he starts beating his head against the wall and things like, and getting in the fetal position. And I'm feeling a lot of kinship with that character, I have to say, after looking back on this podcast. Once again, without the jiu-jitsu moves, alas. Look, thank you, anyone who has gotten to the end of this. Thank you, Melina, for sticking about 2/3 of the way through it. I'm very grateful for what I'm grateful for is for the Peppers who have stuck with us so long and who stuck with us through this podcast and who may be back, maybe not after this. Thank you so much. Have a very Merry Christmas. I'm not grateful to Hunter Biden. I'm not grateful to the Republicans for their impeachment effort, that's for sure. But I'm grateful for you guys. And so anyway, have a very Merry Christmas. Look, think of it this way, think of it as 3 separate podcasts. Just listen to 2 hours of it per week, because I'm coming back in 3 weeks. So I think 3 weeks, something like that. So yeah, just think of it that way. There we go. That's not insane. That's not a cry for help. That's not that's not worthy of therapy. That's a normal thing. 3 podcasts. There you go. I'm just banking them and then releasing them all at the same time. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year. See you guys New Year. Can't wait. Stay tuned.